This episode of The Edge is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
Hi, I'm Rekha Sharma, and I played Landry on Star Trek Discovery. You are listening to The Edge on Trek FM.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Welcome, listeners, to another episode of The Edge, Trek FM's dedicated podcast to Star Trek Discovery. I'm your host, Patrick Devlin, and with me today is Amy Nelson. Amy, how you been?
I'm doing great. So glad to be back on The Edge. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad we're here today again, and it's actually a week. We're recording this a week before, or about a week before, the next short trek, so we'll have something new to talk about in a week. But for tonight or today, we're actually going to go back and revisit some of the older episodes, which is obviously only one season because that's all we've gotten so far. But we're going to take a look at episodes 3, 4, and 5. I guess we might as well. What did you think of these 3 episodes as a whole?
Well, interesting because now obviously we've seen the whole series, and I did all the postcards, and so I can't help but think about what the fans had to say about these episodes. And it seems like these 3 episodes were just on point every single week. Like, people will mention Context is for Kings as their favorite, or Butcher's Knife, or Choose Your Pain. Like, these are just 3 really good episodes. There wasn't too much to complain about. Well, I mean, there's always, people to complain, but like majority, like these are really solid episodes. And watching them again was like, wow, they really are good. I enjoyed watching them again and knowing the end result, to see the little nuances that the writers were putting in way at the beginning, because we get Lorca, and, to know that they knew Lorca's arc and to see the nuances is it's spectacular. I think it's really well done.
Yeah, I would say if you were to take this in 3 episode blocks from start to finish, or maybe you do the first 2 by themselves and then 3, whatever.
Which is what we're doing.
However it breaks down. Right. I would say these are my 3 favorite.
Mm-hmm.
These, they're very much like a movie, though. If you could watch them, they're very much movie scenes. So I could see where some people would say this isn't the Star Trek they're used to, but that doesn't mean it's not Star Trek, if that makes sense. Because this is a lot more action-packed than your typical Star Trek show was. And that's by design. Mm-hmm. It's designed to be more action-packed than your typical Star Trek show. And I liked it for that. So I guess we should jump right in. We'll start with, you mentioned Context for Kings as being a lot of people's favorite episode, and that's episode 3. And in this episode, we get to see Discovery for the first time. We meet Lorca for the first time and find out that Burnham will actually be serving aboard the Discovery for at least a short period of time. We also learn about the spore drive. So that's just a quick rundown of what happens in this episode, but it gets much more in depth in that. And so what were your opinions of this episode, or scenes you liked the most? Something along those lines.
Well, I hesitate bringing up things that I didn't really like, but so I'm just going to start with that, and then we can end on a more positive note. But
okay.
But
don't worry, I'm the one who gets blamed for hating it. You're
right. Fine. Well, in watching it again, we talk about the threat ganglia with Saru and how that's, problematic. But when we see Black Alert for the first time, we have the water pellets, and it's just never seen again. And I'm like, why did they do that? Because when when they go into a jump, the outer disc spins, and we see that that's consistent. And I love that, but we never get to see those water droplets again. And I'm like, well, maybe we're just going to assume that happens every time. But they spent so much time on that first jump with the water coming up, and and they only mention it one other time, is like, well, the walls get a little damp. I think that's in Choose Your Pain, but it's never mentioned again. And I'm like, if they spent all the special effects to make, it was a beautiful scene, and it was very good. Like, here's a clue as to what's happening, because we don't know at this point what's going on. I just wish I could have seen it more consistently with the other jumps. And that really just was this sore spot to me in this episode. And that really is the only thing.
Fair enough. So when watching this episode, it doesn't really matter, because if it's your first time, because you don't know that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
But now watching the whole series and coming back to it, yeah, it's a little annoying that this happens for no reason. Not that it happens for no reason. They don't give an explanation as to why things get down. There's no explanation as to why things get wet during spore jumps. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't make sense, because it's almost as if the water comes out of the countertop and then goes back into the countertop. I would imagine there's not that much water in the countertops themselves. But it's not really something I noticed either. I noticed the scene. Yeah. The scene was beautiful, but I didn't think about it too much. I focused more in this early part of the episode. I focused more on the fact that she was on a prison transport, and if you remember the scene, they actually, one of the other prisoners talks about Starfleet in a very condescending way, which is the first time it happens in Discovery, and it's going to become a theme that the average person does not like Starfleet. The average human on the planet does not like Starfleet. They're not the be-all, end-all we've grown to love from Next Generation and TOS and Voyager and DS9. They're treated more like a military branch that people don't really identify with. Well,
and that you bring that up, it just goes to the point. I sort of wrote down a note, like, it is very well made clear that when Stamets, like, Starfleet co-opted their research, like, they took it. And I'm like, that is a pretty powerful organization, and goes to your point, like, yeah, Starfleet might not be the best thing right now, and Stamets doesn't think so, because they stole his they stole his research and then separated, the two main researchers on different ships, on the Glen. And it's like, Starfleet did this to us. I signed up for a scientific, not this, war and stuff like that. So yeah, to your point, Starfleet is not the end all be all and the utopia that we are used to recognizing. And that is a different shift that we get with Discovery.
Right, and it's actually driving home the point that we had talked about once with, I believe we had Joe on, and we were talking about what exactly is Starfleet, what exactly is the Federation, and Starfleet is not all of the world, which it's not, and that's really this series is really showing that it's a job.
Yeah,
Starfleet is a job that people from Earth or other people that come to Earth and want to work for Starfleet take. And not really anything more at this point, because they're a military force during the middle of a war, and even more so during the middle of a war, they would be just a military force. I find it interesting that they come up with this GS-54 species that is attacking the pod, and then you see the captain go to get rid of it, and you see him fly off. And when this happened originally, the first time I saw this show, people made excuses that, he probably beamed aboard the Discovery. But you see him fly pretty far away out the front of that ship. He's dead.
Yeah.
In my opinion, he's gone, he's dead, and I'm kind of okay with that, because it's foreshadowing for what Lorca's going to become, which is confusing over the next 3 episodes of what Lorca really is or is not.
Yeah, I noticed that too, because later in the episode when Burnham talks to Lorca at the very end, and she sort of calls him out. It's like, well, the transport ship changed directions halfway through, and it's customary to notify me, and that didn't happen. And so that made me go back to that scene where they're talking about this GS-54, and I'm like, did that get changed because Lorca changed the... So then it's like all these motives are going through my mind because we know what Lorca is.
Yeah, I now believe he set up the whole thing. He had them changed. He had her transported. He had them changed, and he had them attacked by that
he
species.
knew that that's where they would be.
Yep.
And
he knew that he could take the shuttle pod if he got rid of the captain. Maybe he didn't want to kill the captain, but if that was what it took, that's what he was going to do. Because his whole mission is to, at this point, end the war. We find out later that that's just not true. But what his outward persona is he's there to end the war.
Yeah.
And he'll do that by any means necessary. As they come on, this is our first view of the black badges, which is cool. They talk about it's a science vessel and how even the prisoners are like, yeah, okay, sure it is. This doesn't look very sciencey to me,
right?
But then we get to the part where just before meeting Lorca, Burnham walks into the mess hall, and even the other prisoners are trying to kill her.
Yeah,
because they blame her for the 8,186 deaths that have occurred due to the war.
And let's make it 8,187.
Yes, and she whoops them.
Yeah.
I mean, she just beats them senseless. They had no chance at defending themselves. Someone did hold back another Starfleet officer.
Landry did.
Shooting.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah, I love that Landry's
Okay.
like, let her do her thing. And again, I think she was trying to see what is she made out of.
Yeah, I think so. I will get into the facts of why I hate Landry later, but for right now, that's cool. I can't stand her.
Well,
but I have theories
talking
about her too.
that, I thought it was really odd. So here we are. And again, it's that shift of what is Starfleet at this moment? Because, everyone knows I'm TNG. And so like Starfleet's a utopia and everything's good. And, but here we have Landry is speaking so meanly, if that's a word, so mean to the prisoners, and I'm like, you don't talk to another human being that way. That's not respectful. I mean, yeah, they're prisoners, but she was just brutal. Oh, we have to feed. Oh, we're taking out the garbage and we have to feed the animals. And I'm like, she was so degrading. And again, I'm like, is it because we don't have this time like we do TNG, DS9, Voyager of what Starfleet is and how we treat people? I don't know. It's very stark to me.
But we're only 10 years
right.
from TOS. So
people still haven't learned how to behave, obviously.
But they're going to in 10 years? So we have a person who's dehumanizing prisoners, right? Which is obviously written on purpose.
Yes.
It's clearly an argument for something in society relatively recent. But in 10 years, that's all going to stop, and they're going to be the Starfleet and the Federation we know of in TOS. That's just a little rough around the edges for me, which leads to my theory. We'll get into my theory about that later.
Oh, okay.
That I think, okay, we'll do it now, fine. I think they were trying to write her as also coming from the Mirror Universe.
I go back and forth, so I totally can see why you get that. But I've gone back and forth with it.
I don't think they did. I think that was the intention, and they changed course somewhere along the story. Because as we find out in the last episode, this is why I want to talk about it later, because we're going to talk about the last episode, how he ends up on the ship. But I just think that somewhere along the line, it was supposed to be her and him came back and whatever, but it ended up just being him.
Yeah. And I can see that because I remember the first time watching this, I was so impressed that Landry was just so dedicated. Well, in this one and the next episode, Butcher's Knife, she was just so dedicated to Lorca. And I thought, man, he's obviously chosen his crew to be dedicated to him. But then you see, Saru from the Shenzhou and everyone else. And so I'm like, yeah, there's got to be something between those two. That's what I thought in first go around.
Yeah, it just seemed odd. So, she seems like a Mirror Universe character to me. And we really wouldn't know that at this point because we're not thinking Mirror Universe yet. But she just doesn't fall in. It just doesn't make sense that in 10 years, or I guess there would be characters like this still 10 years from now.
Yeah.
They're just not on the Enterprise, right? So The Enterprise is the flagship, so it's better picked, I guess.
Yeah, and maybe they've, recognize more, of those officers who are portraying Starfleet ideals better and promote them as they go up. Like at the beginning, you just sort of take anyone who signs up, right?
Yeah, right. Especially during war.
Yeah.
You're in war, so you need people. You need bodies during a war. So you're not as strict on your standards, I guess. Yeah. But
I liked
that was a bit of a tangent.
Yeah, okay, I liked also when the prisoners came on and they were like, "Man, not a scratch on her, and she's so brand new." And it was just like, oh yay, here's Discovery. And when they're coming in, the beautiful shot of Discovery. And the more I see of the ship, the more I really, really like Discovery.
Yeah, I like the ship. I just bought the Hallmark ornament.
Yeah, you showed me a picture.
Yeah, so I bought a couple cool things yesterday. Actually, I bought that, and I bought a Beverly Crusher doll.
Yes.
An action figure for my daughter. But I was really proud of both of them. So I wanted to say. Yeah. So they do mention that. They also mention what is it doing so far from the front lines. Right. Why is it not fighting? So this is the first instance we get that it's kind of, there's something off. About this ship. This ship is not a normal everyday ship. Then immediately after or immediately before that is when we saw the black badges. So obviously we're going to learn more about Discovery herself as this goes on. And we learn that we do. This goes on, we do learn much more about Discovery as this episode goes on.
Yeah, and that's why, again, like watching these, after seeing the whole thing, like we're seeing these little hints just get played out perfectly, I think.
Yeah, well, that leads me into my next point that I liked is when we finally do meet Lorca, he immediately talks about why it's so dark in his room. And he gives the excuse of a battle injury, which we now know is garbage. But people are believing it and people are buying it. And the reason why he won't get his eyes fixed is he, quote unquote, wants his own eyes. Probably more importantly, they'd realize that they weren't human eyes, that they were mirror universe human eyes at that point, and that would be a problem. So that's just an interesting scene to me. That's when he tells her she's going to help. She really doesn't have a choice. And then we meet Tilly, which is an awesome character and a great way to meet her.
Yeah.
She comes in and, she kind of shoves her foot right down her throat first, right out the gate. She talks a lot when she's nervous because she wants to explain that that's her bed because they look the same, but it's actually not because she's allergic to everything.
It needs a hypoallergenic sheets and
stuff.
Otherwise she snores.
Right, which would require her not to have a roommate. I don't know any military who cares if your roommate snores, but apparently Starfleet does. And she also then says, I'm going to call you Mickey.
Yes.
No, you're not.
No, you're not.
Which is interesting because to me, my dad was a Michael, my son is a Michael, they're Mickeys to me.
Huh.
I didn't know my dad was a Michael till I was probably I was lying, I was younger than that. Probably 10 years old. Because everyone just called him Mickey. I just knew him as Mickey. His mom, his dad, his brother, his sisters, his friends, my mother, everyone called him Mickey. I didn't even know that was a nickname for Michael till I was older, 10. And so I literally named my son Michael with the agreement that I would call him Mickey because I don't like Michael.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So there's only one person, well, okay, two. But one of them is my sister, and it annoys me so much because she will call me Ames. And I'm like, really? Are 3 letters? Is that too long for you to say Amy? It's 3 letters.
She actually adds letters.
And, because I like to be called Amy. I don't like the nicknames of Ames, Aim. But my sister and one other person calls me nicknames, and I feel like Burnham. No, you won't.
That is weird because I hate being called by my full name.
Oh, and that's what I call you all the time.
Yeah, everyone does because I've never mentioned it before, but I'd much rather Pat. But that also drives me a little crazy because then I say it to people. Oh, what's your name? Pat. Okay, Matt. No, Pat. Oh. Yeah, Matt. No, P-A-T. So I end up saying Patrick to everyone anyway, but
right.
It's just it's so long and formal to me. But your name's not really long
right.
and formal.
No, it's not. But, it's very manageable, people.
Yeah, but even nicknames, Mickey is not that much easier than Michael.
Right, yeah.
They're both just as long. Ames is longer than Amy. It's AMES or AIMS. So, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so everyone, like I said, Michaels have always been Mickeys to me. So for her to be just like, no, was kind of weird. I get it, but it was weird.
Yeah.
And then it turns out it is that Michael Burnham. So foot in mouth.
Yes.
At that point. And that's when she realizes it, because she just kind of looks at her like, good job. That's exactly who I am.
Yeah. And, and she doesn't want Michael to be on the console next to her at the science station, 'cause,
Nope.
These are saved. Oh, I love it. And then Stamets is like, well, go away, get out of my hair. And it's not like we have assigned seats. And I just laugh every time. It made me laugh again.
What I love about it is Michael goes and stands right next to her
Yep.
again. Like, yeah, I now know you're full of
Yeah.
it. So I'm going to stand right here and do my work. And then they show you her work ethic still, because they show you the people fade out of the scene, because presumably they went back to their rooms and their shift was over, and she was still working on the project while Stamets was talking to, what's his name on the Glen? Yeah. I wrote it down and I can't find that paper.
No, I was going to talk about that too. That sequence is just so beautiful, because you're right. It's showing her at her station doing her job, trying to figure out this code and line of code and stuff. And it's beautiful. That passage of time with her constantly working, it is very beautiful.
Yeah. So a few things. I didn't work out the math, but they were talking about Spirion 12 and Spirion 240. And then later they talk about how far those distances actually are. And they don't give specifics, but like Spirion 12 was a couple 100 meters, right? Or something like that. And Spirion 240 was like 900 kilometers or something like that. So obviously Spirion's going, it's done exponentially.
Right.
It's not a 1-to-1. Like Spirion 1 is not a mile. Spirion 2 is not 2 miles.
Right.
It would be more like 4 miles or whatever the number would work out to be.
I knew you were going to bring it up, and I did not do the math.
No, well, you can't because they don't give you any kind of
right. And when I was listening,
legit numbers.
Yeah, and I watched this a couple times in preparation, and each time I'm like, there's no way that I could put a correlation to that. Number one, because they aren't specific, because they're always saying, well, like when Lorca is saying, well, we've only been able to go a couple 100, or a couple, whatever. And nothing's ever really exact. And so I'm like, well, I'm not even going to try to do the math for that, because it's arbitrary.
Yeah, no, so they gave two numbers at some point that I grabbed and put in a calculator, and it was like, I don't know, 200 to the times 10 to the 49th power or some garbage like that. I don't know.
Impressed.
I can't remember now. Yeah,
Put me to
so
shame.
I can't remember exactly what it was now, because then they said two other numbers 5 minutes later after I figured that out. I went, well, there goes that theory.
Yeah.
But so it was some ridiculous number, and then to go 900 would have been
right,
which makes sense. It makes sense that 900 would be a ridiculously large number, because they said once you can do that, you can go anywhere in the known universe.
right. Well, because then they were going between quadrants, right? So they went
Correct.
to the beta, and
Yeah. So at that point, the numbers would just my calculator would probably overheat trying to figure this out. But I did like that they did talk about this, and they so they gave us at least an idea in our head. That whatever that, like, let's say Discovery can go from planet to planet, or maybe one star system to the next, and the Glen had already figured out how to go across the star system.
right.
At least they didn't just say, "Oh, we've jumped across the star system,"
Yeah.
which would have been. I'd rather technobabble at that point.
Yeah.
Which is what we ended up getting, which is fine. And that's when Burnham becomes a lurker and explains what's wrong with this code.
Yeah.
Which is cool. And then that's when she decides she's going to break into the lab and uses
Tilly
a
slobber.
hypo spray, and Tilly slobber and a hypo spray. I guess that's what it looked like, but it was like an
Compressed air,
assault can. Yeah, it just seemed like a weird place to find it, but it was there, and it gets her in, and that's when she sees the spores, which they're cultivating, and then she thinks back to hearing about it all comes into play later because she thinks back to hearing about how the Glenn doesn't have to do that and how that has advantages. That plays out in the next episode, so I guess we'll talk about that more then. And this is when we find out that there was a Black Alert incident on the Glenn.
Right.
And that everyone was now dead.
Yeah.
Which is sad, but we really didn't know the crew, so it wasn't that sad for us. It was more sad for Stamets.
Yeah.
Who's a jerk at this point, right? I mean, he's just a massive jerk, so screw him.
Yeah, I think he's still bitter from Starfleet, taking over his science project.
Yeah, if he's also mad at his friend. If you read the comic book and you want to bring that all together, the annual, and put that in as part of this, they didn't really steal his work, but his friend was going to leave with or without him, and he was going to work for Starfleet either way. And this was after fighting them off for years. So he agrees to go because he doesn't want this to be done without him.
Right.
But he very reluctantly agrees to go. And one of the reasons is because he thought that Starfleet could get them killed.
Yeah.
And he was sort of right. Although I think that with what we find out is the problem here, they would have got themselves killed anyway. Because eventually they would have figured out they needed this other part, right? Which turns out to be what they call Ripper, but it's tardigrade. And once they find that out, they would have used the tardigrade and it would have killed them eventually. So I don't think this is really a Starfleet fault, but if I'm Stamets, I'm definitely going to blame them.
That interplay with Stamets and when he meets Burnham for the first time and I thought you were Vulcan, and that exchange, was I mistaken?
Yeah, it was. I think there was a misunderstanding on my part. Yes, no.
I know. Yeah,
you're making this complicated. Just go somewhere else. We don't have assigned seats.
Yeah, and the lovely reference to the Beatles. I thought that was funny.
Yeah. Yeah, because she explained, no, I was born on Vulcan.
And went to the Vulcan Science Academy. And
yeah, and my cousin plays in a Beatles cover band, but it doesn't make him John Lennon. That was awesome. But that shows off his jerkness perfectly. Yep. That's exactly who he is throughout all of this. And it's very telling of who he is going to continue to be, even with some changes to his personality as we get to know him. But that's really who he is. He's sarcastic and he talks back.
Yes.
That's just what it is. He also doesn't like her because she's put in by Lorca, who he doesn't like at all. He hates Lorca, which is becoming more and more telling. I had that down that he hates Starfleet and he hates Lorca. But so now they have to go over to the ship. They make Lorca bring Burnham with him. Not Lorca. They make Stamets bring Lorca with him. And he doesn't like that idea at all. And the best part of that whole scene is he looks to Saru and he goes, "What do you think of her?"
What is your assessment?
And he says, and he says, "Mutiny aside, she's the smartest Starfleet officer I've ever known." He goes, he knows you.
Yes,
I love that line.
That's awesome.
It's such another jerk line back.
I know,
but it was so well delivered, and and even Stamets was just like,
yeah.
So a smack talker had nothing to say back at that moment, which is great.
Well, you wouldn't really talk back to your captain, but
he does.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, he does at times because he doesn't want to be there. See, in order for you to worry about being thrown out of Starfleet, you have to want to be in Starfleet in the first place. So, and he knows that, especially now, those scientists can't do this job without him. There's nothing Lorca can do. Stamets actually holds more power than Lorca if he wanted to play those cards. But Lorca's crazier, so he's going to win, on the show. But whatever. Another scene that comes up after they get over there that I really like is when the Klingon walks out. It's just kind of funny for a half a second and then terrifying. And he goes, the Klingon goes, "Shh. Did he just shush you?"
I know. Landry delivers that so perfectly. Is he shushing you?
It really was done well. And then he dies immediately.
Yeah.
So, and this was our big introduction to Ripper. And he's terrifying, or she, whatever Ripper is terrifying. It mutilated Klingons. You unfortunately see Stamets' friend all mutilated. That wasn't from Ripper. That was from their accident that happened. And then Ripper got out. But what'd you think of that whole scene, the walking around on the ship. And
yeah, a typical, scary moment, and with the doors, trying to close on that one leg. It really reminded me of that Enterprise episode where the Vulcans go mad.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah.
The Warp 5 guy, I can't think of the name, but we just covered it on Warp 5 recently, and we tied it in with zombies, because it was a typical zombie movie, which is exactly what these scenes are. They're a zombie movie, or, typical monster movie kind of scene.
And we lose the one security guy, so, he's gone, he's taken out. So we just have, our main characters with us going through, and I liked it. I was actually pretty grateful that they showed us that it was gory, but when looking at it, and I saw it twice, I didn't know exactly what I was looking at. I just saw that it was obviously meant to be somebody, and that it was all strangled and, blood and guts and stuff, but it wasn't, you couldn't see exactly what it was. And I really appreciated that, because it led to the mood, but without the expressed visuals. And I was really grateful for that, because I don't like a lot of gory and blood and guts.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of like guts per se, but like you could see like the guy's ribs were kind of forced out of his back the wrong way, and his mouth was in two places. But so a lot of this reminds me of Enterprise in general, which is weird because it reminds me nothing of Enterprise as well. But it is the way they film the ship is very much similar to that Vulcan episode, but more so than that, when they hit the anomalies in season 3 of Star Trek of Enterprise, it does those kind of things to their faces. It like warps them, and it changes the way they look. They make a big deal of that.
Yeah, that's right.
And,
that's right.
Yeah, so and the turning people inside out thing that happened in Enterprise, and where it reminds me nothing of Enterprise, which is something I like about it. We now have seen in the first 3 episodes someone die. People die, which in Enterprise we didn't see anyone die till season 3. Nobody died until season 3, and that was the whole changing of the mood of the series. And I think this really sets the stage for this is not going to be like Enterprise. We're not happily gallivanting around. This is war, and we're going to show you war. And they're showing you this immediately in all of these first 3 episodes. And unfortunately for that unnamed crewman, or maybe they named him, but I don't remember it. Yeah, they did, because they said he's gone, right? But unfortunately for him, he went the way of every red shirt and just got mutilated.
I know. I always think of
sight.
Galaxy Quest. I'm only crewman number 6. Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time,
it's so true,
it's like, oh, I don't know him. Oh, he's only crewman number 6. So.
Yep, it's so true, though.
Well, that's interesting you bring that up, because I hadn't really thought of that. But in TNG, we lose Tasha Yar first season, and she was a main character. And so a little foreshadowing for Choose Your Pain, Butcher's Knife. Yeah. So it's not good to be a security chief there, security officer.
No, it's not.
Because Landry.
Not at all. Worf did well, though.
Yeah.
but no, they don't make it through first. Don't be a security chief on the first season.
Yeah, that's
at least on the first episode. never works out well. Poor Landry.
So it was interesting when Burnham comes in after, and it's at the end, and I just sort of noticed this theme, and it really started here in this episode where, she is resigned, and you can see through the whole episode, like even when she's talking to Tilly, she's not going to make friends. She's not here to be here for a long time. She's going back on that transport. She's resigned to serve her sentence and has accepted she will never be Starfleet again. And when she goes into Lorca and he makes her that offer, and she's like, I know who I am, and then she's got this idea of what Starfleet is, which I think is a little different than what we've talked about already, but she's got this idealistic of what Starfleet is, and that's who she is, and she's going to remain that way. But then Lorca is like, I know who you are, because we have seen it, it's like, well, yeah, he knows Mirror Burnham, and I think he's sort of bringing that and portraying that onto that he thinks he knows, Prime Burnham. But I love that exchange that they're both saying that they know who this Michael Burnham is. Yeah. And I think that comes through in the other episodes, which we'll talk about. But I just think that that's so powerful and interesting to see the two perspectives because, they list reasons on why they know who Michael Burnham is.
But I actually, at this moment, believe Lorca knows her better than she knows herself. And for two reasons. One, because he does know Mira Burnham, which we've seen, unlike every other series, this one actually makes the characters very similar to each other with just small changes that make them either good or bad, morally good or bad. And two, he's researched the heck out of her to find out if she's the same person with the same mindset. Maybe not the same morals, but the same mindset. And that's why he wants her on this ship. What I did like about that back and forth was when he goes, you like to be right, but I suspect you hate to be wrong even more. So let me stop you right there. Because she was going on about not creating a weapon and that these weapons were outlawed by the Geneva Conventions of 1928 and 2155, 55, which I love the fact that they added a second Geneva Convention and gave us a date. Because I'm a history nerd. So they bring up they don't just talk about the second one, they actually bring up both, which is really cool because you would assume that eventually the Geneva Convention has to be changed, right? Yeah. Like massively changed to fit the times.
On technology, yeah.
Right. So 2155 sounds like a good date to do it in. And it also, I think it's cool that they go back to the Geneva Convention. They don't just keep writing new treaties everywhere.
Right.
It's just interesting. Although I wonder if the rest of the universe would care about the Geneva Convention as much as I do, but they probably don't. And that's when, and then after this exchange, which is awesome, you get to see her bounce around from place to place inside the spores.
Yeah.
Which is an awesome scene. But at the moment, he makes a little quick comment at the end. He's like, and then you're back in the blink of an eye, like it never ever happened. So when you first see it, everything's kind of fuzzy around the edges. So you're like, well, is she really going to the Senate floor at Romulus? Did she really go to, and then names, these different places? Or was that really just holographic images?
Well, so I was really paying attention because that confused, the heck out of me the first time I saw it. And so I was listening and he's like, when he's putting her in, he's like, do you want to see where the spores have been and where they could go? And so I think that was, I don't know. I was thinking, now I'm saying it aloud and I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. But it seemed to me like these were where the spores have been, and that she was seeing sort of the spores' memory of that.
Right. That's what it seems like. But I think, I don't know either. I think we're supposed to believe that she was going to those places, but she would end up in Romulus and no one would notice.
Well, there was no one around.
I guess. She was like in a building though. No, I guess she was on a plane for that, right? Yeah, I guess. It's just weird with the fuzziness around the outside, and that could all just be because that's the reach of those particular spores at the moment, which we don't really, again, this is like the water droplets. We never kind of talk about that again, because I guess every other instance of the spores we see it dropping you off somewhere and leaving you there. Not bringing you back to where you started. So I guess it makes sense that we would see that fuzz around the outside. Either way, it doesn't really bother me. I just thought when I saw it the first time, not knowing what we know now, it seemed like it was like a hologram. They were in on a holo deck, not a propulsion. But he was explaining propulsion. So
yeah, because it was a new way to fly.
To be propulsion.
Yeah.
Right. And right before that, and I meant to bring this up, but right before that, he had a great line where he says to her, universal laws are for lackeys. And then obviously the title of the episode, context is for kings, meaning it's okay to break the rules if you're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah. I wrote that down in my notes too. Like that is so important. I think that is a great concept. And I have been battling with my principal about this and in education and I'm sure in any profession. Like you just can't make a blanket statement and have it apply to everyone. That just doesn't even make sense. And especially in my realm of education. Like, you just can't say that and think that it's going to apply to every single subject matter. It doesn't. You have to look at it case by case. And so whenever I hear that, I always think of my schooling. But yeah, that is a great concept that I think is amazing. And I love that Lorca says it because it explains him so much.
Yes, but it explains him in a way that confuses you.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know he's from Mirror Universe yet. So is he bad? Is he good? I still don't know. I still don't know if he's meaning I'm better than everybody else, so I get to decide what I want to do because I'm bad, or I'm trying to win a war. The war is all that matters. The ends justify the means, and I can't just listen to a stupid set of rules in order to do that.
Yeah. Well, and one thing, still going along with that conversation, but earlier, someone was asking, well, what mission is that? What is your mission? Oh, Burnham is, when she first meets him. And it's like, well, what mission is that? And he says, to win the war, of course. And so it's lovely to see that he's using this because now we know he's Mirror. And you're right, because that's going to be the facade that he puts forward. Like, I'm trying to win the war, even though we know he's trying to get back to the Mirror Universe. So I love that interplay. And so when he says, context is for kings, that's allowing him in his mind to break the rules because he is, taking it case by case. It's great.
Yeah, I love it. And then at the very end, we see Burnham, because we're 40 minutes in on this one episode.
I know.
But so at the very end, we see Burnham. I'm just going to hit this real quick because I love Alice in Wonderland. Give Tilly the book for Alice in Wonderland and explain the significance that Vulcan logic can't always explain everything, which we've never heard before from someone who was raised Vulcan. And that book was read to her and Spock, which also explains some of Spock's motivations. Not just that he's half human, but that he was actually taught to sometimes up is down, down is up. She goes through a couple of things that the reverse is true of each, which is amazing. And it's all spawned by Alice in Wonderland storytelling.
Yeah.
Please stay tuned, as next week we will go over episodes 4 and 5, the continuation of this retrospect on episodes 3, 4, and 5 of season 1 of Star Trek Discovery. Thank you. So it's been fun talking about episodes 3 through 5 today of Discovery, but this isn't the only thing we've been discussing here on the network. So here's a quick look at some of the other things you may have missed elsewhere on Trek FM.
Previously on Trek.fm, Earl Grey.
Well, I have a question. Why is Worf late for duty? Was that because of the particle? They weren't even there yet.
It's because of puberty and how kids
sleep extra
they
long?
Sleep more during puberty.
I think that was the idea.
Basically, biological needs. They require more energy, sort of thing.
Okay. All right. I didn't understand that one part. I was like, what's going on? Okay. Thank you.
Because I used to get yelled at all the time at that age, too.
Richard, wake up.
Yeah.
Primitive Culture. A look at history and culture through Star Trek.
And how we treat our criminals is almost kind of a sign of what kind of society we are. And that's the kind of this sort of message of past tense is basically Sisko is saying that things have to get worse before they get better. But this is a sign of what humanity used to be like.
Standard Orbit.
I feel really awful because, the Omega Glory is quite possibly my least favorite episode of Star Trek ever. And I mean, Shades of Grey exists. I really, really, really dislike it. And the reason that I dislike it is because it's a lot of, the stuff that I associate with the worst excesses of Roddenberry.
The Edge, a Star Trek Discovery podcast.
First, he says to Georgiou, my place is no longer here, in a very somber tone. But then the narration of him goes, I saw hope in the stars. It was stronger than fear, and I went toward it. And it's one of the greatest Star Trek lines of all times.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out all these shows and join the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they are published. And please leave us a star rating and written review.
If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, YouTube, Windows Phone, in most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website or grab the RSS link.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. The best place to join in the larger conversation is the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, B-A-B-E-L, into the search field on Facebook, and it should come right up. If you'd like to send us an email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show and select the Edge. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. So, Pat, where can people find you when you're not plotting your escape from a Klingon prison ship?
Well, when I finally get off that ship and I get back to the regular world, they can find me on Twitter at MagicDrop5. They can also find me popping my head up in the Babel Conference from time to time. I've been very busy, and editing this episode is going to take forever. So who knows? But
they can also find you.
Yes, they can. The last place they can find me is, well, by now you've probably heard Brandon's going to be taking a little time off, but I will still be coming to you from Warp 5 with my buddy Brandy, and Brandon will drop in when he can. So hopefully we'll hear more from him than not. So Amy, when can people reach you when you're not trying to tackle me in a hallway trying to escape that Klingon ship?
Well, anytime you try and leave the Edge, I will be tackling you in the hallway. Well, you can find me here on the network. I co-host Earl Grey about Next Generation with Richard and Justin. You can find me on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson, but my favorite place is the Babel Conference.
If you'd like to help us keep all our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all the details. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and more. Available through our special patrons website, Patron Zone. It requires a great deal of money to produce, host, and distribute these shows each month. We really appreciate any support you can give us and hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM.
We'd also like to thank our associate producers, Norman Lau, Tony Robinson, Thomas Puleo, Lisa Slack, Shoab Mirza, Richard Rutledge, James Modrow, Cornelia Reutner, Ryan Millay, and our newest associate producer, Chris Tribuzio. Thank you so much for supporting Trek FM and especially The Edge.
Thank you for listening, and join us next time to see what's happening on the edge of Federation space. I'm so sorry.
Well, we are going over.
I heard my wife screaming bloody murder. I thought one of the kids were hurt.
Oh.
She was yelling at Alexa to stop.
Oh.
She had it turned up to 10, and on the show, I don't know if you've seen the show, it's the one with the screen. At 10, it can't hear you. It's just too loud. So she's like, Alexa, stop! Computer, stop! Alexa, shut up! But I can't hear what she's saying. Just that she's screaming. And I see my son with a worried look, so I'm like, just go upstairs!
Oh my gosh.
I get up there and my wife's standing. Stop! Stop! We just got it, so she didn't know there were buttons on the top to turn the volume down so it will hear you.
Oh my gosh.
But at 10, it will not hear you.
Oh. That's funny.
She's like, so you can't hear it at 5, right? And I was like, I couldn't hear it at 10. All I could hear was you.
Well, this is now twice Alexa has ruined our podcasting.
It is.
Because
she also
talked about it with Calypso.
Yes. She also gets confused because in my bedroom, the wake word is computer.
Uh-huh.
So it kept adding things to my grocery list that they were talking about on the show. Every time someone said computer, it goes, we'll add that to list. Or, I don't know that command.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.